Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be teaching you Ionic with Capacitor. Capacitor has become a de facto way of building Ionic applications. So we have Ionic, which is a UI library, which also integrates with Cordova. Ionic website itself don't recommend using Cordova anymore. So what they recommend is Capacitor. We're going to be using Ionicframework and integrate with Capacitor, and I'll show you how you can use Capacitor APIs with Ionic app. At the end of the tutorial, I'll show you how you can run your application on iPhone and also on Android. If you want to learn mobile application development with Capacitor, this is the video for you. I'll show you how you can build and package your application for iOS and for Android as well. So I'm really excited for this tutorial. Let's get started. Before we start our tutorial, I want to just introduce to you my course on Angular 10 on Udemy. This course will give you in-depth training and will teach the concepts instead of just teaching Angular 10. Now, Ionic uses Angular at its core since the beginning. Now they release React and Vue, but Angular is like the most used framework with Ionic and Capacitor. And if you want to learn about Angular, this course is for you. And there will be a coupon link which will give you 50% off in the description of this video. So yeah, I welcome you to take a look at this course. So without further ado, let's get back to our tutorial. Here's our outline for this video. So first thing, we need to install Capacitor JS CLI. Then we will create a Capacitor JS project. Then I'll show you how you can integrate Ionicframework within the Capacitor JS project. Also, we'll take a look at a dev environment with a library load, adding resources like icon and splash screens for your Android and iPhone apps. And then we use Capacitor device plugin to get device information. Also, I'll show you some more Capacitor UI plugins available. We also have official plugins and then community plugins. We'll take a look at how do you find community plugins and how do you use official plugins. Then we will learn how to integrate Cordova plugins with Capacitor. We will build and run our app in simulators, and then we will learn how to learn more about Capacitor JS and Ionicframework. So let's get started by making sure we have Capacitor JS CLI installed. We go to capacitorjs.com, and here you will see all the documentation. We have ionicframework.com open as well. Here you'll find all the documentation for Ionic. You can use Bootstrap or any UI kit with Capacitor, but I recommend using Ionic because this is built by the same team and it's very well integrated with Ionic. On this URL, getting started, we have installing Capacitor guide. In this paragraph, they mention that they strongly recommend using Ionicframework with Capacitor, but Capacitor is built with the mindset of dropping this into existing web application. There's only one package that you're going to need, Capacitor Core and Capacitor CLI, which helps to run or serve or build our project. Now you can install this Capacitor by using Ionicframework when you create a new Ionic project. And there are a lot of benefits of creating Ionic project with Ionic CLI over Capacitor CLI. One example of that is you will have everything set up in terms of toolkit from your Ionic project. And there's going to be a lot of manual work that you'll have to do if you create a project with Capacitor CLI. So we'll do both. First of all, let's create a Capacitor JS project from the plain Capacitor CLI, and then we'll compare that with Ionic. If you want to install Capacitor directly into your web app, you can just install these two packages, Capacitor Core and Capacitor CLI. Now, this will help you to use Capacitor within your existing web application. But if you want to start a fresh project, here's a command using npx utility. So I'll just copy this and we'll go to VS Code. And I'm going to open actually a plain terminal and I'll go to desktop. And you can see the same command, npx capacitor, and I'll enter, and then directory, I'll just say capacitor. That will create a directory as well, and it's asking me which npm client I want to use. You can use yarn or npm. I'll use simple npm. Now you can see it is installing all the dependencies, and then our project is ready. I'm going to go to VS Code and open that folder. We'll go to desktop, capacitor, and open the project. Now there are some commands that you can use to serve this project. So if I type npx cap serve command, this command is going to use this www directory, and then it will serve the content from this directory. So it says serving web content, and it will open Safari, or in this case, the default browser of your computer. And then you'll see Safari is coming up. There you go. That's the local host running on 3333. They'll say on the page, they're recommending to use Ionic. Let's take a look at how do we install Ionic using CDN. We'll go to Ionicframework documentation, and we got this packages and CDN. Now I'm showing you this documentation over and over again because I think that's the best way to actually create a crash course, so you will have an idea how to explore and learn more about the technology you're trying to learn. And here we have this Ionicframework CDN. I'll just click on this copy, and that will copy that. Then I'll go back to VS Code. Then we're gonna put those into the head of our HTML file, and that's where I pasted them. Once I save the files, we go to terminal, and as you can see, our web content is getting served. We'll go to Safari, no change. We'll go back to VS Code, and I'm gonna stop the server. Let's go and open this index.html file, and I'm gonna just get rid of this comment here, and I'm gonna get rid of this one. I'm going to comment that out. This is just this file that is getting served, this capacitor dash welcome. Okay, so one thing we can do now is go back to documentation for Ionic. I'll go to component section, which has all the Ionic components that you can use from, and the examples are really good. You gotta make sure that you select the JavaScript instead of using Angular, Vue, or React. So we'll go and create a simple button with Ionic. I'll click on this Ion button, and that'll give me some example code. And I will use this one, ion-button, copy this, go back to VS Code, and I'm going to paste that here. I'm going to save this, go back to our terminal. I'm going to use npx cap serve command to run our server. We go to Safari, I'm going to refresh, and it's not loading anything for now. So what's going on there? So it says serving web content. I'm going to save this file, and let's go and take a look. Okay, so there we go. Our button was created. This is a very simple Ionic component that we were able to use. Now, if we can use this, we should be able to use the rest of all the components available in Ionicframework. So here is a list of Ionic components. I'm going to try finding tab. When you look at the mobile application, you have like a tab-based UI. So here we got tabs. I'll click on that, and I will make sure I'm in the JavaScript, and then simply I will copy this by selecting JavaScript and copying this, go back to VS Code, and I'm going to just paste that here. I'm going to save this file, and we go to Safari. I'm going to refresh, and there you go. You got tabs, scheduled, speakers, maps. Obviously, they don't do anything yet, but we can start working with these now. So that's mostly the UI part. I'm going to try opening that in Google Chrome so we could see how responsive is this. So if I just do this, and you can see it is responsive now. There you go. So that's looking like a mobile. If I look at this toggle device toolbar, and I look at this in iPhone 6, 7, 8 Plus, you'll see this is how they're going to look like when they're going to be viewed on iPhone. So we'll go to Ionic documentation. Now at this stage, you are going to be able to use all these components, and these components are good enough to build a full mobile application UI. So we have, if I go to, let's just say, go to components, we got action sheets, we got alerts, we got badges, we got cards, and these are all the common UI components that are required to build a nice looking mobile application. All right, enough for components. Now we'll go to Capacitor JS. We have our project, and this project is using Ionic CDN version, using these 3 links, which we found on ionicframework.com. Now let's take a look at this project briefly. It's a very simple npm init package or JavaScript package where we have this capacitor-app. We got some dependencies here. So there's only two dependencies right now: capacitor-CLI and capacitor core. Now, a little bit of introduction to capacitor CLI and capacitor core before we move forward. We go to Chrome, and I would like to show you a couple of things in capacitor docs. If we look at plugins, all of these official plugins that are part of capacitor core, okay, you can use all these plugins in capacitor core plugin, which we can use right now because we did install this capacitor core. The second package we have is capacitor CLI. Now, capacitor CLI will help you to execute these commands. If I click on this CLI, I'll go to this page, and here there are all the commands available in capacitor CLI. And this is very well integrated with Ionic CLI as well. We're gonna be using some of the commands here to show you actually how do you build a project using this capacitor CLI, in case you just want to use capacitor with Ionic as a CDN version, because Ionic brings a lot of other things like frameworks and other things that you will see here. So this project is very simple. We got this www folder, and we got CSS folder, JavaScript folder, one Capacitor JS file. We also have some configuration files like capacitor.config.json. I'll click on that, and here you'll see all the configuration for capacitor. We have an app ID, app name, build, web runtime. To read more about this, we need to look at a documentation for capacitor. Next, we have this package.json, which you should be familiar with already, readme file, and that's a very simple capacitor project that you create. And now it's time for us to look at some more options which will help us to configure our application with all the boilerplate code that we need. One thing that I want to mention here, for example, if I do npx cap serve command, okay, I'll go to index.html file, and then here I will, first of all, let's open Chrome tab, and here's our application running. I'm going to refresh. Actually, refresh again. Now it should be running, so we needed to wait. So refresh, and we got this default button there, right? I'm going to go back to VS Code, and I'm going to delete this. I'm not going to save this, but just delete this, and you'll see it is still here. So what you can do is, in VS Code, you can trigger this autosave. First of all, I'll save this, and I go back to Chrome. It still does not auto update. So what I'll have to do is, I'll have to refresh this page to see the changes. And that's because this capacitor CLI is not having this live reload function. So once you change, save, and then you will have to refresh the page. When you create an Ionic project, that will automatically set up the live reload functionality for you. So I recommend using Ionicframework to create a capacitor project. Before we do that, I would like to use one of the capacitor plugin and then build a project using capacitor for iOS. So in VS Code, I'm going to expand the terminal, and I'm going to stop this serving web content. We got a few commands. We use npx cap add iOS. Now this command will going to read capacitor.json file and then build an iOS project for us. I will press return, and you'll see it is installing iOS dependencies and also creating this iOS project. Now you can see there's a command npx cap open iOS that will launch Xcode within this folder. So you can see we got this iOS folder, and we have our app. So to be able to open this quickly, I'll use npx cap open iOS, and it says opening the Xcode workspace. So let's just wait for Xcode to come online. Okay, so we have Xcode running, and it is indexing our project now. It has a display name and build identifier, a version, and a build number. Now I can click on this and then go to, for example, iPhone 8 Plus, and I'll click on Run, this play button here. and that will give us this emulator, and then our app inside it will be installed and then launched automatically for us. So just wait for the emulator to come online. Now, this is okay if you want to use Capacitor as it is and use Ionic or Bootstrap or any other UI library and use Capacitor plugins. That's completely fine. But when you create a project with Ionic, that will give you a framework like Angular, React, or Vue out of the box, and that will all be set up. And then you'll have some, better support, because those like especially with Angular, Ionic has been as a first support of Angular was there in Ionic 1 and Ionic 2 and 3. So yeah, there we go. Our application is running in iOS emulator. It doesn't do anything. Well, it's supposed not to do anything because we haven't done anything. One thing I'll do is I'll click on this and I'll go to Window and I'll say stay on top. So I can work in VS Code and also see this emulator on the side. Now, let's just say if I want to make a change to, let's just say index.html, and I'll add Ionic button there. So use ion dash button. That's just like a default button. I'll save this. Now notice we don't have, a functionality to update our emulator directly after saving our file. So what I'll have to do is I'll have to use this command npx cap sync iOS, enter, and you'll see it will sync it. And then I'll have to open Xcode and then click on this play button again, and that will build and launch our application. And then we'll see we have that button there. There we go. So the button now just came up. But all this manual stuff can be automated as well. And it's definitely possible within this project, but there's going to be a lot of configuration that you're going to have to deal with. So I highly recommend using Ionic to create a capacitor project. Let's get rid of this project and create a new project using Ionic CLI. I'm going to open Terminal. And on Terminal, first of all, we need to make sure we have Ionic CLI installed. So the script for that would be npm install -g at ionic/CLI. Okay, you need to install this Ionic CLI. Once that's done, I will actually close the emulator for now. And let's close this Xcode project. Now we can use Ionic command to create a new project. I'm going to go to desktop. And first of all, I'm going to remove this project. So I will just open a new window and I will close this workspace. So I'll just say close the window. All right, let's expand this. Let's go to terminal, and I'm going to remove that capacitor project by using rm-rf. That's like a terminal command. We can start a new Ionic project now. I'm going to start by Ionic start --list, and that will tell us all the available templates that we can use. So it's time for us to choose which framework that we would like to use. So you have an option for Vue, Angular, React. You got this Ionic 1 project or Ionic 2 and 3 project, which is this Ionic-Angular. So we're definitely not going to use this starter template for Ionic 2, 3, and 1. We're going to have the latest version. So I would use Angular, and default framework that Ionic uses is also Angular. And Angular support has been in Ionic 1 and Ionic 2 and Ionic 3 as well. So these two, React and Vue, just came along after Ionic 4 was built. So we will still use this Angular, but we want to use Capacitor as well, right? So what I can do is I'll start typing command here. I'll use Ionic start. The first I need to specify the name of that. So I'll just say capacitor, and then I need to use a template. I'll use a blank template for now. And instead of typing this type as Angular, I'll use capacitor. Okay, the configuration will be a bit different. Now it says capacitor is not a valid project type. Well, that could be the case. So once you see these kind of error, the way you can fix them is by going to original documentation. Now here we have this using with Ionic, and that's the command that we can use --capacitor instead of --type equal to Angular. So I did that mistake on purpose so I could show you how to learn more, how to explore more. So go back to our terminal, and now I'm going to use this --capacitor. And I'm going to use Angular as a project type. Press enter and you will see it is downloading and preparing the directory for us with blank template as a starter package, and it's also installing this Capacitor CLI and Capacitor Core plugins that we install our plain capacitor project. Then it says, hey, your capacitor project is ready to go. Use npx add Android, add iOS, add Electron to add these projects. And now it's doing its installation for npm. So let's wait for this to finish. It says installing dependency may take several minutes. So that's fine. We'll just wait for this to finish. Okay, so at this stage, our project is created. Now we will open this directory in Visual Studio Code. And right now you will see in Explorer, there's a lot of changes compared to the project that we had. We have a capacitor.config.json file, which we are familiar with. I'm going to just remove this key. Also, we have this package.json. Let's take a look at the dependencies. So we use the Angular as a framework, so that's why it installed all these Angular packages. We have this Capacitor iOS package, Capacitor Core. In dev dependencies, we have this Capacitor CLI, and then some Angular dev dependencies. We also have dependencies for our test runner, which is Comma, and then we also have this protractor for end-to-end testing. And then TypeScript is configured by default. Angular uses TypeScript, and this is where we see these TypeScript config files like tsconfig.json file. We're no longer using plain JavaScript with Capacitor and Ionic. We also have this angular.json file, which is a configuration file for Angular project. I'll take you back to package.json. You have some scripts, and scripts are basically using this ngserve, ngbuild, and ngtest. These are Angular CLI commands. So right now the king is Angular, and Ionic is a UI library. Capacitor will help you to generate iOS project. One folder that we can see here is this iOS project. Now, if you don't see that here, you need to run some commands. We take you to a documentation, and I'm going to go to Ionic CLI and then go to Capacitor CLI command. Now, in the last project, we were using these commands. If you notice, these commands can also be triggered using Ionic CLI now. In Ionic CLI documentation, we have this capacitor add, build, copy, open, run, sync, update, and they're going to trigger the same commands like here. So you can use Ionic add command to add iOS project. I'll go to VS Code and I quickly going to delete this folder completely. Okay, we'll open terminal, and I'm going to, first of all, this www folder, you might not see that when you have your project running for the first time. What you'll need to do is use Ionic build command, enter, and that will build you this www folder, which Capacitor is going to use to serve its constants. So here is in capacitor.config.json, it has this web dir, which is set to www folder, and then it's going to be to this folder. Now, the difference between the source folder and www folder is that www folder has a compiled version of our source code, which is quicker to run, and this will be used to serve our application. Now I'm gonna just clear the terminal, and let's continue with some other configuration files. So we know we have a package.json file with all the dependencies and some scripts. We also have this TypeScript configuration. We got this angular.json file for Angular configuration, capacitor configuration. We also have this ionic.config.json. This is the Ionic configuration. Here you will see the name of your application and integration. Right now it's set with capacitor, but it can also have a Cordova integration as well. Type is set to Angular. And this file will help Ionic CLI to trigger commands based on our folder structure. We have this E2E folder, which is our end-to-end testing with Protector, and all the testing files you will write here. I'm going to take you to source folder, and that's a plain Angular project. So if you create an Angular project with Angular CLI, you'll see the same thing. You have an app folder where all the app component and home component starting. So let's run our app for the first time. Now you could actually use npx cap serve, and that will actually serve this www folder. So let's wait for Safari to come online. There you go. We have our blank template being served in Safari. Well, that's okay, but when you use Capacitor to serve this, there's going to be a lot of issues, because if I go and make any change to this home page, go to VS Code, I'm going to go to home, and I'm going to go to home page, and here it says ready to create an app, and that's what is written here. So what I'll do, I'll make a change, I'll delete this, ready to live reload, enter, and save. Then we see Safari is not getting updated. So what's going on there? Well, the problem is we're using Capacitor. What we need to use is, we need to use Ionic now, or Angular. So I can use ngserve command. Now it says, oh, ngserve is not found. That's because Angular CLI is not installed. So we can use Ionic npm install -g at Angular/CLI. Once you install that globally, you'll be able to trigger this ngserve command directly from your terminal. Otherwise, you'll have to use some of the scripts which are here. Okay, so we got a install ngserve. But this time, you'll see it says the global Angular package is greater than your local, so it's going to use the local version. That's fine. So we'll just wait for this to finish. Then we will have a second way of serving our application in the browser. So now I'm going to go to Chrome on the localhost 4200, which is the default port from for Angular, and I will just make it. Okay, there you go. The app is looking good. It's serving by Angular, but we will not use Angular because we will have some stuff that we want to do, and that is only available in Ionic CLI. So what you need to do is use Ionic serve command. This will add this host tag, and then it will define the port 8100, which is a default port for Ionic. There you go. So we have a third way of running application. So in quick summary, we have Capacitor that can be used because of Capacitor CLI install, and Capacitor CLI is a must because we need to create iOS and Android native projects. And we have also Angular, which is a framework which wasn't available for us in the Capacitor plain project. Now you can use directly Angular to serve stuff in the website. And at the end of the day, your Ionic application is just a website. Now, Capacitor makes it easy to integrate with native capabilities of your mobile phones. So now what we'll do is we will create a new project, iOS project, and run that in emulator. I'll stop this by Control-C, and then I'm going to use nps cap add iOS. Well, I could use Ionic command, don't I? So instead of this, I'll use Ionic cap add iOS. Enter. And you'd see it says installing iOS dependencies, and then it's also going to copy the web content to iOS app public, and we have this iOS. Now here it suggests to use this npx cap open iOS because it uses Capacitor CLI, and that's a suggestion from there. But I can use Ionic cap open iOS, where I'm getting these commands from. So if I go to Ionic CLI documentation, here you see you have this Capacitor based commands as well. So I use this Ionic Capacitor, this one, Ionic Capacitor open command. So now I'm going to use cap. Cap is the shortcut word, so you can use capacitor full word or just the cap. Now there you go. You got this Xcode opening, and then all you need to do is just click on this play button to run the app in emulator. So I'll just stop this and run it again. Okay, the problem is because you might have to select this theme. So I'll just use this automatically managing and then just use this theme. Then I will clear this by pressing Command Shift K and then build it again. And it says, oh, you don't have that iPhone as a register device. So what I'll do is I'll just cancel this and I'll go and change this to emulator iPhone 8 Plus, and then I'll run it. And once you select emulator, you won't have to do the signing in capabilities because emulator does not require that. So we'll just wait for this to build our application, and then there you go, you got an emulator coming up. One thing I can do is go to window and make sure that stay on top is enabled. So now we have our application running in emulator. I'll go to homepage.html file, and that's what it's getting served from. So now if I change this, let's say live reload to something, let's just say, so I'll say implement live reload in emulator. I'll save this, doesn't update. What's going on? So we can do is we can actually use Ionic CLI to run the application in emulator and then actually get it served from the local server, which is going to be port 8100. So the command for that is very simple. So do Ionic cap run iOS -- live reload -- external. Okay, now this command is not going to be available in other CLIs. It's only Ionic one. So press enter for this IP. Now, you might be wondering what the configuration is going to change to be able to serve this emulator to the server. So what it does, if you go to capacitor config file, you'll see this tag will appear. Let me go back to the use code. So server, and you have this URL, and this is where it's going to take its web content. Then we go to Xcode, and I'll click on play button this time. Once I click on the play button, app will come online, and you see it is mentioning using app server this time. So we'll go to home page.html, and it says implementing live reload emulator. So to say live reload is enabled, I press Command S. You notice it will change the code in the terminal. You see that triggered, and then you also see the changes in your emulator. Now let's clean up a little bit to get rid of a few things like this line. I don't need this, and I don't need, let's just say I don't need this as well. Okay, and then just change that to capacitor. Now, the development has become much easier now because we have our content getting served right in Emulator, and this also works on a real device as well if you have connected your real device to your computer. Now let's go to home page.html TS file. So I'm just going to close some files here so we have more space. I'll go to TypeScript file for this home page, and here I'll show you how you can use capacitor plugins. That's the first plugin that we're going to use. We're going to find out our app is running on which emulator and its ID. So first of all, let's go and do import and import plugins from at capacitor core. Okay, we need to get the plugins. Then inside our home tab, I would like to create a variable. Let's say device info. We'll just set the type to any for now. And then here I will use this implements on init. And then we need this ng on init function. And inside this, I will use this dot device info equal to this. So we can use directly plugins dot device, and then we have 4 functions available. And where is this thing coming from? Well, if I go to capacitor plugin documentation, you will have this device plugin. And if I click on that, that'll give an example how to use it. So it's telling me import like that. You can also do const device equal to plugins. Well, we're not going to do that because we can directly access this plugin. Then we have this async, so info away device.get info. That's the function. And it has 4 function, and we can see the 4 function in VS Code as well. So we'll use this get info function. Okay. Now I'm going to go to home.page.html, and I'm going to use Ionic card. And one thing you notice that you have the IntelliSense for Ionic as well. Previously, when you created this capacitor project and implemented Ionic, you didn't have this IntelliSense for Ionic. So I'll use this, let's just say ion card dash header. And inside this, we're going to use device info dot, and we find that here. So let's just say we want to find that app ID. I'll copy this and I'll say app ID save. And now we should see an app ID. Well, it is not showing us app ID because it's a promise and we have to wait for it. So let's do it, wait. There you go. So now when we do async function and we just use await, now you notice one thing. We have this ion.ionix starter, and that is coming from our capacitor project. Now if I change this to home.os capacitor, I'll save this. Now you notice it is not going to update your project. It's only going to update the project which has a web component, and this is the configuration level change. So if you do any change which is like a configuration level, you will have to reinstall your application. So I will go to terminal and I will just stop the server, and then once done, then I will do cap run iOS live reload and external. Then it will run the application again. Then we will open Xcode. Then we will install this, and you will see that changes here for ionic.starter because this time we have changed the app ID. I will click on run. And this time you notice we have this ionic.starter. Well, the problem is because this configuration is only used when you generate this iOS project. Okay, so where this coming from? So if we look at this ion config, this one, nothing here, not here. So basically, this will not change unless we generate this project again. Okay, or you go to Xcode and then change it here, like com.os result.capacitor. I'm not going to do that. So I will regenerate the project. So ionic.starter. We'll just leave that there. Okay. I'm going to close the terminal, not terminal, but emulator, close the Xcode, and I'll simply go and delete this iOS folder after I stop that on the terminal. Right click and delete. Now I can confirm I have changed the app ID. So this time I will go to terminal and I'll say Ionic cap add iOS. Then I'll use Ionic cap run iOS dash dash live reload dash dash external. It will open up us Xcode and it will prompt us to run the application in emulator. So let's just wait for this to finish. It is opening first time because we delete that and opening it again. So the Xcode will basically need to build it from scratch. So let's just wait for this Xcode to come up. Okay, so we got Xcode. I will change this to iPhone 8 Plus. Click on this play button. You have an emulator or simulator, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so now you notice that we have this corp.westminster.capacitor. Well, that's getting read from here, and the project is created, and it's never going to change unless you do that through Xcode or info.plist file, which is an iOS project. Okay, so now we can access Capacitor plugin right here, and I've shown you how you do that in Angular and TypeScript. That function will give you pretty much all the details. Now I'm going to go to Home tab, and here we got this app ID. I'm just going to move this, make a copy, and then I will change this to, let's just say, we need to find out what we can access. So we can access the model. Let's find out what is the model that is being returned. Save the file, and we have the model, which is iPhone, and it's not actually putting on the next line. So what I'll do is I will cut this, and then I'll use Ionic card content, and the Ion list, then the Ion list item. Actually, it's not there, so Ion item. Then we will cut this bit and put it here. Your iPhone now, and I'm going to just copy this, and I'm going to grab app ID there as well. Let's get rid of the header. We don't need that. Okay, and then what we need is, let's just say, is virtual. A lot of time in mobile application development, you need to find out if the app is running on emulator or not. So very, very easy. That'll help you to say if it's true or false. Okay, I overridden that, so that's app ID. So now you can see you can access all this information, and it will tell you if you want to find out the battery. So let's find out the battery. Well, you need to have that function again. So what I'll do is I will use this dot device info, and I'll use this battery, and then I'll say equal to await plugins dot device dot get battery info. And then if I use this battery within this object, I'll give device info the battery, and you'll notice the battery is coming as object. Well, that probably return an object. So what I'll need to do is that's promise object. So let's go to documentation, and here it returns this, and that's the battery level and is charging. So we'll do this dot battery level. It says -1. Okay, so is charging. This one, that return true. Yep, false, because it's not charging simulator. So yeah, now you understand how to use official plugins. We can try some UI plugin as well. So we'll go to model. And here's the model API provides method for triggering native model window for alert. And the same thing can be done through Ionic. So if I go to Ionic website with the framework documentation, and go to component. And then here we got these models. So this is basically a web view models, not a native model. So if I click on this, show model, that will trigger this model, right? We can do that with Ionic, but not with Ionic, but Capacitor, but they are like a native Windows for alert. So very, very easy. We just need to copy action sheet, open style, and then I will go back to VS Code, go all the way up to TypeScript file, and then we can just put that here. Then I'm gonna just copy a sample code from here, like show actions. I'll copy this, and then I will create that function here. Now instead of this just models, I'll use plugins dot model, and that'll fix the problem. Now we are going to add a button after this. So I will use this Ionic button, and I'm going to do size, actually fill. We have an Ionic button. Let me try finding the properties for that. So we have properties, and then here is a button type, color, download, and fill. And we also have this size, yes, size set to large. So I will use size to large. And then I'll just say open model. Okay, then I want to trigger that function. So in Angular, you do ng click. And then here we'll just say, what is the function name? That's show action is a function name. And I'll just call show actions. And then click on model, and you'll see that trigger came up, and they've got upload or share. So this is like a native now. It's not a web-based anymore. Also, if I go to capacitor model, we can add some like confirm alerts, and then here we got some API. So yeah, this is very, very self-explanatory. Every official plugin have some guidance and a sample code. So here we got this browser plugin. Then I can just call this. So for example, if I want to use the native built-in browser of mobile, what I can do is go to this, or create a copy, and I'll just say open browser. Function doesn't exist, but what we will do is we will just go and create that. So we're gonna home tab, and I'll just say async function, open browser, and then here we'll just paste this bit. And directly accessing browser is not available, so we'll just do plugins.browser. If I click on open browser, that will open a native browser, and you can see it is taking you to capacitorjs.com. And I click on done, and that will bring me back to my app. So you see this kind of functionality in a lot of mobile applications. Next, I wanted to show you where you can find community-based plugins. So if you click on this button in a getting started, and then go to explore capacitor community, that'll take you to GitHub. And here we have a lot of community-based plugins. And you can basically, for example, if you have this FCM, which is file-based cloud messaging for capacitor app, click on that, and then you'll basically have some guidance here, how you install it, and how do you use that. And pretty much all this community plugins are available, which are really, really good. You have the like it's open source, and then you can modify them as well if you want to. Capacitor also allows you to create plugins. So if you go to this guide, creating plugins, if you know a native development like iOS and Android for Kotlin for Android and Swift for iOS, then you should be able to generate plugins. And then the boilerplate code can be triggered by using this command. So yeah, we'll go to guidelines. So we have seen this bit using UI plugins to get device information. We build and run in simulator, and then integrating Cordova with Capacitor. Well, Cordova plugins can be used by, Ionic wrapper. So if I go to Ionic, I go to native, and then here we got all the Cordova based plugins. So if I click on Cordova plugins, and now you can, for example, find a device information plugin. So if I go to device, here it says access information about underlying device and platform. Now, I would like to click on capacitor, and it'll give me the installation guide, and Cordova installation guide is there as well. So if you want to use the Cordova one, what you need to do is just use this command Ionic Cordova plugin, add this, and then install that. And then you'll have some information how to use that. So depending on Angular. So as you can see, even we in the JavaScript, it is giving us the Angular way of importing it. So if I go to, let's say, React, it's still the sample code is in Angular. And that's because the history reason. Ionic has always been supporting Angular, and Angular was the framework, was basically used to build Ionic 1, 2, 3, and even now, I would say 70% of existing apps are built with Angular, maybe more, maybe 99% apps are built with Angular and Ionic. But depending on the current, the React support and React popularity, a lot of people probably use React as well. So it's just a framework. Yeah, so that's how you're going to use this Cordova plugin. The last thing we need to talk about is learn how to learn more Capacitor JS. Well, throughout this tutorial, you have seen me going to the documentation and finding the solution and finding the resources, how we explore. And this was like, a lot of beginners, they don't realize, they go and buy the courses on Udemy or other platforms, spend money, and then say, oh, I don't know what's going on. So every technology has its original documentation, and that's the best place to learn. And now you can see Capacitor and Ionic and how I used it. You can go and find things that you need within these two websites. And then if you're using Angular framework, yes, angular.io is here as well. We're going to go back to VS Code, and I'd like to show you how you can run your application on Android now. We've been looking at iOS, but it's time for us to touch Android stuff as well. It's very simple. It's just a few commands similar to iOS. So we were able to add our project. So I'm going to go to iOS folder, as you can see here. But if I want to add an Android project, I'll do Ionic cap add Android. And that's it. It's going to integrate your project with some dependencies. That's what it's doing right now. And if we go to package.json file, you will see one package that will be installed is this one, Capacitor/Android. That's the package. And it says syncing Gradle. So this Android stuff can take a bit longer than just an iOS. So I'll close the iOS terminal. Xcode, I'll just close that as well while we wait on this project to build. Now you notice the new Android folder that was created by this command, and I can use the same command that we did with the iOS, Ionic Capacitor open Android, and that will open Android Studio with this Android folder. So let's just wait for this to finish. Okay, so let's open this Android project, Ionic Cap open Android, and that will open Android Studio. And with this folder, let's wait for that to open. And then the process is very simple. You just gotta click on some play button to select your emulator, and that will run your application. And you can always use that Ionic cap run Android -- live reload -- external. So I expect Android Studio to come online, and then we should be able to open this. We can actually open this project manually by click on open an existing project. We go to desktop, Capacitor, Android, and click on open. At this stage, you will see the processes running. It can take a while depending on your Mac, or if you're on Windows, depending on your computer. Once that's done, then the simple way to run this in an emulator, it would be just clicking on this play button. Now, if you don't see any device here, you might want to learn about AVD Manager in Android Studio. that will help you to create emulators. And then you can select that emulator from this list from here, and then just simply click on this play button, and that will help you to run that. Similarly, with iOS, you can do this command Ionic, so we'll go terminal, Ionic cap run Android dash dash live reload dash dash external. And that will help you to run this or build this Android application with this live server. And then from there, you could actually run it and then update the code, and you will see the changes in Android emulator. And I'm just gonna stop the video from here because this will take a bit of time. And I hope that if you were watching this video, you knew a bit of iOS and Android already. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. If you like this video, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel to support it, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Cheers, bye.